Oregon or bust. This article explains the process pioneers went through to travel on the Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail opened in 1841 with 35 men, 5 women, and 10 children using it to make the trek from Independence, Missouri to Oregon City, Oregon. In 1842, 100 immigrants took the same westward trail. In 1843, the number of people traveling increased to 1,000. During the late 1840s and early 1850s, tens of thousands of settlers made the journey every year. From 1840 to 1860, approximately 300,000 to 600,000 immigrants traveled the Oregon Trail. Getting ready. The preparations for a journey west on the Oregon Trail took more than a year. Immigrants had to sell land, businesses, and property while gathering the supplies they would need on the journey. A wagon built to withstand 2,200 miles across plains, mountains, and desert was the most important piece of equipment. Wagons were 6 feet wide and about 12 feet long with 3 feet high interior. The wagons had to be tall enough to cross through streams without completely submerging. Tar buckets hung from both sides so settlers could fill the cracks between the boards with tar to make the wagon waterproof when they crossed rivers. The canopy of the wagon was oiled to keep rain out. Water barrels hung from the back of the wagon and were filled with water from rain and streams. Other things that hung on the sides of the wagons included buckets of axle grease, extra wheels and axles to replace ones that broke, coils of rope to lower the wagons down steep hills, and extra leather harnesses for the animals. The inside of the wagon was often crammed with the supplies needed to make the journey and for use once the settlers reached Oregon. Most families carried about 200 pounds of flour, 150 pounds of bacon, 20 pounds of sugar, 10 pounds of coffee, and 10 pounds of salt, at a total cost of $300 to $600. They also carried rifles and ammunition that totaled about $100. Their clothing had to be sturdy and well made, and each person needed strong boots or shoes for walking and to withstand the weather conditions along the trail. A team of 8 to 12 oxen pulled each wagon. A wagon and oxen team cost each family about $400 to $600. The total weight of the wagon's cargo pulled by the oxen was about 2,500 pounds. Life on the trail. The geography of the land dictated the travel route from Independence, Missouri to Oregon City, Oregon. The terrain and weather along the Oregon Trail influenced the events and the conditions experienced during the travel. It was critically important to embark at the appropriate time of the year. If the settlers left too early in the spring, there would not yet be enough grass on the prairie to feed their livestock. If they left too late in the spring, they risked being trapped in winter snows in the Cascade Mountains near the end of the trip. Travelers usually left in May and hoped to reach Oregon by October. It took them 6 months to make the 2,200-mile journey. Each wagon train headed west from Independence, Missouri, for 200 miles across the tall prairie grass of the Great Plains. In some places, the grass was so tall, men had to stand on the backs of horses or oxen to see ahead. This was the terrain until they came to Fort Kearny and the Platte River. Fort Kearny was the first of 3 trading post letters. The Platte River guided them along the journey for the next 450 miles. It was a broad brown river that was too muddy for drinking or bathing. Along the Platte River, the tall prairie grass turned into short prairie grass. There were also fewer trees, so the settlers used buffalo dung for fuel in their fires. At the 650-mile mark, the emigrants reached Fort Laramie and were ready to begin their climb into the Rocky Mountains, where they would face hot summer days sprinkled with summer thunderstorms and hailstorms, followed by cold mountain nights. During some of the thunderstorms, it was necessary to chain the wagons together so they wouldn't be blown away. About 250 miles farther, they reached Independence Rock. People signed their names on the rock, and it became known as the Great Register of the Oregon Trail. Independence Rock signaled a gradual, winding, gentle climb into the Rockies across the South Pass. After South Pass, the travelers headed northwest into the unrelenting sun of the dry, dusty desert country until reaching Fort Hall, which was the 1,200-mile marker. They continued northwest along the rugged rock ledges in the canyon of the Snake River, making a grueling climb over the Blue Mountains. At times, the wall was so steep the wagons had to be taken apart and using chains and pulleys hauled up one side and then lowered inch by inch down the other side. The immigrants proceeded west along the Columbia River for 200 miles to the settlement called Dallas. They now only had the final stretch of the journey left through the Cascade Mountains into Oregon City. This was a narrow trail lined with thick trees. The downhill parts were very difficult because they were so steep and slippery that keeping the wagons and oxen from sliding downhill off the path was the challenge. The settlers tied big logs on the back of the wagons to act as brakes. They also often encountered snowbanks in the Cascade Mountains. A typical travel day began at 4 a.m., with the men on sentry during firing a wake-up shot.